Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Elisa Ruffin with Leading Educators, and you are on the Grade 11 ELA lesson video series. Today, we are in Week 8, Lesson 35. I hope you're ready for the back half of the new story that we're reading today, House Painting. Yesterday, you completed the first half of your first read doing annotations and beginning in on the summary. Some of you all may have went ahead and finished so that you could know the ending, and I'm happy if you've done that as well. If not, you can clean that up today and make sure that you have a complete summary ready to go. In addition to completing your first read annotations, you're going to be responding to a few questions, all of which I will model for you. Before we jump into all of that, though, always remember that when you're done with our lesson activities for today, that you're sharing your learning with a family member, caregiver, or friend. You're completing the weekly fluency activities using a page from the text, and you're doing an additional 20 minutes of reading a day of a text of your choice, some reading for leisure. If you recall from yesterday as well, we are continuing along our routine of riddles of the day, and this time we're doing riddle poetry. Now, yesterday was a little bit tricky, and remember I told you that they're going to get increasingly more complex as the week moves on. And with that in mind, I am going to give you hints here and there to make sure you have the best chance possible of knocking it out of the park and getting this answer correct. So this is a point in time where you gather everybody around or you clear your mind and focus so that we can exercise those brain muscles before we get into the text today. Are you ready for the poem of the day? That's also the riddle of the day. Well, then here we go. Listen carefully. There is one that has a head without an eye, and there's one that has an eye without a head. You may find the answer if you try, and when all is said, half the answer hangs upon a thread. There is one that has a head without an eye, and there's one that has an eye without a head. You may find the answer if you try, and when all is said, half the answer hangs upon a thread. So here's my guidance for today, folks, as you contemplate the answer to this riddle. It looks as though there's actually two answers here, right? So the first line says there is one, and one of them has a head without an eye. And then the other one is one that has an eye without a head. What could possibly have a head without an eye? And what could possibly have an eye without a head? Think about that. Is that an actual living thing? And if not, then what object could those first two sentences describe? And then the cryptic, half the answer, so that means one of the two answers, hangs upon a thread. All right, I'm going to stop giving clues now and give you time to think, talk, discuss, because for some of you, that was already too much of a spoiler. All right, this is the moment where you pause the video if you'd like some more time. Remember, we're not Googling. No more time for Googling. Just more time to think, talk, and discuss, right? Because here comes the answer. Pins and needles. Pins and needles. So you may not be familiar at all with sewing, okay? But pins, if you think of a push pin, they have a head, right? That's what the actual top of the pin is called, but no eye. And needles have an eye, right? But no head, right? The eye is where you put what? The thread through. And so there is the key to that was offered in that last sentence. So pins and needles, folks, pins and needles. Hopefully you got that one. All right, now that we've done that, let's make sure we have our resources for today. You need the house painting text, your learning packet, turn to Week 8, Lesson 35, and the note catcher. A pen or pencil and a mobile device is optional if you'd like to access the text digitally. Another reminder about the background of the text. Our author is Lan Samantha Chang. This is a piece of narrative fiction, and remember, we are focused on a character, a main character, who is wrestling with the idea of duty and expectations of family and her own desire. The essential question of the unit is still true and still relevant here. What do stories reveal about the human condition? And the guiding question for the text, how do people manage conflict between duty and desire? And that is the conflict that one of our main characters finds herself in. Learning targets for today continue on from yesterday. I can read and summarize the plot and background of house painting. I can record my ideas and questions about the characters and events as I read the story. So you are going to be reading pages IL20 to IL22 if you haven't done so already. If you have done so, but you didn't do your annotations, this is the time to pick up on those again. We are using the same guidelines as we did yesterday because we are still in the first read. You are going to talk about a different topic, however, with your family member, caregiver, or friend. You're going to think and talk about, I should say, why do you think Frances was so upset that Way agreed to help paint the house? Provide specific examples from parts of the text and record your answer in the note catcher. So when you get to that portion of the story where Way is painting the house, there is some upsetness about it. You need to think about why that is. And then in your right section today, you are going to research the term Xiaoxun from the story. Explain the connection between Xiaoxun and the concept of saving or losing face. We talked about both of those terms yesterday, so your understanding of those terms are going to come in handy in the right section today. And you're going to talk about how those two terms help shape the plot of the story, and then provide support from the text. And then when you close today, you're going to identify and explain the theme of the story of house painting and record your response in the note catcher. As always, I'm going to model all of these things for you. Let's start. Underlining words, phrases, or sentences that describe the setting and give background information about what is happening when the story begins. We're boxing unfamiliar words or phrases that you come across as you read the story. And then you're going to write down any emotional reactions, opinions, or questions that you have about the character's behavior in the story as the story unfolds in the margins of the text. So a brief review and recap of what we did yesterday, just so we can reorient ourselves to the story. These are our notes from the first section of reading that we did. So paragraph 1. As you notice, we underlined the first few sentences there because it gave us the current scene, let us know that this was a family in anticipation of the visit of a daughter and sister and her boyfriend, and that they're anxiously awaiting her arrival. We also know about thistles here. This is part of the center of the conversation, overpowering the mailbox, Mom being concerned about that, and then Dad saying Frances is not worried about those things. She just wants to see her family. So while thistles may not seem like an important term, it's essential because it allows for the author to give you insight into the character of Frances. So it gives an opportunity for Dad to comment on what he believes to be Frances's priorities. Okay, so now we're moving on to a section from the text today. And we are going to continue in our first read. Please join me. We are at line 79. My mother was in the kitchen cutting canned bamboo shoots into long, thin strips. Where's Dad? Don't shout, Annie, she said. He went to the hardware store to match some more paint. Why is Way painting the house? My mother lined up a handful of bamboo shoots and began cutting them into cubes. He's just being helpful. Why is Dad letting him be so helpful? I couldn't find the right question. Way must have asked my father if he needed help with the house. Why had my father consented? Why was he accepting help from an outsider? My mother turned and looked at me. Because Way wanted to help, that's all. Why don't you go and wash up? You're 13 years old. I shouldn't have to remind you to wash your face. Okay, let's do our annotating, folks. So we're going to start by underlining the background information here. My mother was in the kitchen cutting canned bamboo shoots into long, thin strips. So this reorients us to the text. We know where we are. We're in the kitchen. Mom is cooking. Okay, so we know where we are in the plot. And we know she's having a conversation with Annie, the younger sister. And we know also that Dad is at the hardware store and Way is painting. We know a lot. Bamboo shoots, just so you know, some of you may be familiar with bamboo, but not bamboo in the vegetable. Okay, so bamboo shoots, aka bamboo sprout, is a vegetable that is the edible shoot of a bamboo plant. And the bamboo plant is a species of plant. So you may be used to bamboo in a particular way, but not necessarily for eating, right? This is different. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's important. And then as we look at the context of this conversation and dialogue between the mother and Annie, the youngest sister, who we now know is the narrator. The thing that comes to mind for me is the fact that Annie asks about why Way is helping to paint the house. And she doesn't just ask once, she asks twice. And then in between asking, she has a thought to herself, like, I can't quite come up with the right question. So basically what she's saying is that it seems as though to me that there's more than meets the eye with this particular act. There's something unsettling about it for Annie, and it has more meaning than at the moment we're clear on. And Annie is trying to put her finger on it, but at the very least we know that she feels like Wei is an outsider, and this act of painting the house is not something that is normal or should be allowed based on Wei's standing with the family. Now that we've walked through the second half of that first read, it's your turn to do the same. So you're going to underline, box, and write following that protocol for pages IL20 through IL22 if you haven't done so already. And making sure you're having a conversation with your family member, caregiver, or friend about the question, why do you think Frances was so upset that Wei agreed to help paint the house? Now, we already know Annie was upset, and that's from our first reading that we did in our quick model. But you'll also find out that Frances isn't too happy either. So once you do, you need to think about and talk about why you think she was also upset. When you are done, you're going to make sure that you come back here because you're going to pause the video in a moment, and I'm going to walk you through the right section and close for today. So go ahead and pause the video. All right, welcome back, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed the resolution to that story, and we're going to talk through what you're focusing on for the right section today. So today you're supposed to research the term Xiaoxun from the story, and you already have the definition of that provided for you in the text, and you saw that in your annotation. Your job is to explain the connection between Xiaoxun and the concept of saving or losing face, which we've also discussed, and how the two shape the plot of the story House Painting. So first and foremost, go back to your annotations, the one we did in the first read, in the first part of the story, and our definition of face and saving face, right? So we know that it's a deeply rooted Chinese cultural term and historical term that refers to a person or group's public image, or this idea of being respectable and upright. So therefore, saving face means that you are protecting or maintaining the pride and dignity of a person or group, in this case, a family. If you remember, Xiaoxun means filial or dutiful to one's parents. And also know that we made note that while Frances may not care about the appearance of things, so the commentary over the thistles and the mailbox, that her father believes that she does care about the idea of face, which includes this deeper idea of honor and dignity. And so does her boyfriend Wei. So now that we know what face means and saving face and Xiaoxun means, what are the connections between the two? Making those connections will help you answer the question in the right section. And you'll also see how the two are woven together to create the plot of this story. So make sure that you're making direct connections between the two terms and really thinking through how the two things and ideas are woven throughout the course of the story and really drives the plot. And then finally, to close, you are going to identify and explain the theme of the story House Painting, recording your response in the note catcher, and make sure that you're including some examples and evidence from the text as always. So you know what theme is here. You know that the theme is the reoccurring message throughout the course of a story. Sometimes it could be summed up in a word, sometimes a phrase. And we just, in our right section here, explored two major ideas that appear throughout the entire text, okay? So the right section has already identified, I would say, hint, hint, two critical concepts that will lead you to the theme of the story. And now that you've already written about their importance and connection and how it drives the plot, you really should be able to identify, explain what the theme is very well. So now it's your turn to complete the right section on Xiaoxun, as well as face and saving face, and then building on that, identifying and explaining the theme of the story to House Painting. You are more than prepared to do this. I know you are. If you need to pause the video and replay more than once, do that if you need support. And then if you get stuck, you can email a teacher for additional support using the information provided. Always remember that when you are done with all of the day's activities, you should be sharing your learning with a family member, caregiver, or friend, completing the weekly fluency activity, and doing an additional 20 minutes of reading a day from a text of your choice. So we've come to the end of another lesson here, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you've enjoyed the story, and I look forward to further pulling it apart with you next time.